Welcome back to Hot Takes and Deep Dives, and I am here with the man the New York Times calls the CEO of Hamilton. He is the producer behind Rent, Hamilton, Avenue Q, In the Heights. You have 4 Tony Awards?
Hello. Yes, I have 4 Tony Awards for Best Musical.
For Best Musical. All right, calm down. We're not done with your intro. Sit tight. And you are one of the most successful producers working on Broadway. Your book, Theater Kid, is out now. I absolutely loved this. Hi, Jeffrey Seller.
Thank you, Jess. And I so appreciate your kind words.
How are you?
I'm great. I just got here on my bicycle. I did my Bikram yoga class this morning. It was my 15th class in a row. And and I can feel all kinds of great vibes going through my body right now.
You're also a runner?
I also run and sometimes do triathlons.
I know you do the Bikram yoga, but were you ever into... For some reason, you strike me as a spinner. Like, were you ever into like flywheel or... So you seem like the type.
That is so strange. I have done flywheel. I have done Soul Cycle. But I like, if I'm going to go cycling, to get on my bike and go. So I'll cycle up the George Washington Bridge. I'll cycle up 9W. I'll cycle in the Hamptons. I like to be out
Outside.
on the road.
Yeah. Because I mean, otherwise you're in that 108 degree room. I get why you'd want some fresh air.
Yeah. We're starting in a very sporty way, Jess.
Listen, I know what I'm doing. No one else is going to ask you about it.
I love it.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to start by reading something. I want to read something because I thought it was hilarious. And I feel like it cuts right to the center of present day and also your entire mission statement with all of the work you do. And this is about the original debut of Sunset Boulevard on Broadway. Nearly, 30 years ago?
Oh,
now?
dear. Yeah, that would be 1990. That's right before Rent. It was the fall of 94.
So at this point, so let's really paint the picture because this recounts a conversation. You're laughing. This recounts a conversation that you had with friends. You are still struggling. Rent is your big breakthrough. So at this point, let's quickly paint the picture. At the time that you were sitting in this cafe, wherever you are for dinner with friends, bring me to 1994, Jeffrey Seller. What is your life looking like? Quickly before we read this.
I'm turning 30 years old. I'm with my friends at a table at Trattoria dell'Arte on 7th Avenue, 57th Street for my 30th birthday party. And we're all still struggling. David Stone is there, who will go on to produce Wicked. My business partner, Kevin McCullum, is there. And Kevin and I own a booking agency. We book the national tours of Broadway shows. We want to be producers, but we are not yet producers. And really, it's a moment in time where I'm struggling with the question, am I ever going to be a producer? Because I'm never going to be able to afford to put on a show. I'm never going to be able to raise all that money. And maybe it's just not going to happen for me.
In a similar mindset phase, a little bit of desperation as Jonathan Larson, struggling.
Well, yeah, it was not terribly unlike him being the struggling 30-year-old composer of rock musicals that nobody wants to produce, which, of course, he dramatized in Boho Days, which became Tick, Tick, Boom.
Okay.
So there we are. But I guess we have enough scratch that we can at least afford dinner at Trattoria dell'Arte.
That's true. Good point. Okay, so basically, you guys are hanging out, you're at dinner, and the most anticipated new musical of the season is Sunset Boulevard. And you guys are kind of recounting the whole Patti LuPone drama, how she did it in London and then was replaced by Glenn Close. And of course, she then sues Andrew Lloyd Webber, where I think she calls it the Andrew Lloyd Webber, what does she call her
swimming pool? Because she built she got $1 million and built her swimming pool off of those monies.
And so basically you're talking shit about that. And then one of your friends says, one guy goes, that's fucked up, like about the whole drama, how she was replaced. And then your friend goes, it's not that good, talking about Sunset Boulevard. And he goes, the way they just kept singing the words Sunset Boulevard gave me a stomach ache. Boulevard just doesn't sing. What it really is two good ballads surrounded by a lot of crap. And then what do you says? I think Patty's going to have the last laugh, a premonition. And then you say you say something that I think really underscores your entire mindset and why you are successful. Somebody says, why does everyone spend so much time knocking the only new musical on Broadway? Because at this time, this was the only new one. Why does everyone spend so much time talking shit about this work? And you say, because we care, because we want to do better.
Wow. Yes. That was true, and it's still true. I still care, and I still want to do better.
So, cut to today, 2025, hottest ticket on Broadway is Sunset Boulevard. Here's what I want to know. I want to know your review of Sunset Boulevard.
No one cares what I think about Sunset Boulevard.
Trust me, they're listening and they care.
Okay.
My listeners care and I care.
Okay.
I am what's most important here.
Okay.
I want to know your review, and then I want to talk about the use of technology and video, so that'll segue us into that. What do we think of the revival?
When I watched the incredible opening of Act 2 of Sunset Boulevard, in which the young actor who sings Sunset Boulevard does a little tour through the catacombs of the theater, through the dressing rooms, through the stairwells, and then goes out on the street, sings on the street all the way down 44th Street around Schubert Alley, picks up the whole chorus with him, comes back, the whole thing on video, and then the whole audience watches it, and then screams with delight. I thought, this is either the greatest theatrical moment I have experienced in years, or it is the end of theater as a conveyor belt for meaning. Because we in lyric theater are trying to create meaning. And that gesture, which was virtuosic, which was ingenious, and which was fabulous, had no meaning. Him singing about Sunset Boulevard, going through the backstage. Someone tell me what that means. I'll tell you what it means. Creative directors trying to get my mind off of the fact that there's no meaning. So I was mixed about it because I thought it was both fabulous and still Sunset Boulevard. In what way is Sunset Boulevard genuinely trying to delve into what it means to feel disregarded? In what way is it genuinely delving into what it means to give up all of your values to sell yourself to make a buck? And in what way is it delving into the question, how far will I go to take care of someone who I deeply love? And that's what it's about. So my question to the viewer is, in what way has it illuminated those themes for you?
How did you feel about the use of technology? The screen?
I thought it was the most spectacular use of film on the stage that I've ever seen. Although we've seen so much this year. I mean, the projections at Redwood are the most gorgeous projections I have ever seen on the stage, creating a redwood forest. So we have seen some extraordinary use of video, and in both instances, the use of video is organic to the mission and effective. So I actually thought the use of video for Sunset Boulevard was magnificent.
Have you seen The Picture of Dorian Gray?
Not yet, and I hear that's also stupendous.
This is taking it to a level this is going to blow your mind because they're using 5 camera crews. I watched a critique. You know who my favorite theater critic is?
Who?
It's a guy on YouTube. He's like an act. He's not, he's a wannabe. You were a wannabe producer. He's a wannabe theater critic. Actually, he's an actor who just does this for fun.
Well, he is a theater critic.
Okay, I talk to my friends about this guy all the time. The name of his channel is Bored and Confused. And basically the criteria is, was I bored? Was I confused? And he says He's like, I just don't understand why they didn't just film this whole thing, and why am I not just watching it on my iPhone? Because you're sitting in the audience and it's a vertical screen. So it's all meant to be like iPhone footage, or to look as though it's, and then the filters and such. And it builds and builds and builds. And then suddenly the one moment she is interacting, like there's some pre-recorded stuff, and she's acting with herself as all the different characters in Dorian Gray. That is the way the whole thing is directed and produced. And his critique, and I kind of agree with it, is like, you're really watching a film being made right in front of your eyes. And the question is, yes, it's theater and it's more performance art. It sort of questions like, what has theater become? Or is this just like this is theater at its most extravagant? I don't know. I guess if you didn't see it.
Yeah, so I can't possibly comment on Dorian Gray, but I can say that I want theater artists to capture my imagination and surprise me with the smallest amount of technology possible.
Come back after you see it. I want to talk. Can you text me? I want your review. I mean, I enjoyed it, but it's a head scratcher of like, what am I watching?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good questions.
Okay. You grew up in Michigan. You had an interesting childhood with your parents, and you were always a theater kid, like the title of your book. And I love how you went to camp. Like you and I have we do have like a bit of that. Like I'm from Long Island, and there's some crossover. The main shows that were imprinted on you were, of the time, Cats, Les Mis, Phantom, Miss Saigon. Like these were the big things. And by the time you came to New York, the friends in your circle were like, they're like, yeah, they're fine, but they're not our stories. They're not our people. They're not our stories. And your whole goal in becoming a producer was, we want to tell our stories and how our lives are. Yes?
Well, those are all of the words that I ascribe to Jonathan Larson. Jonathan famously said to me, and not to just me, but to many of his friends, about the musicals of the 80s. Those aren't our stories. That's not our music. Those aren't our characters. And what was Rent, but ultimately the antidote for all of that. And I want to say, from my perspective, that set of musicals from Cats on was the second generation of musicals I was exposed to, because the first was when I got to see A Chorus Line and Pippin and those great shows of the 70s, and of course, Evita and Sweeney Todd. Mm-hmm. And so the first batch of musicals that became my guiding light were really Pippin and A Chorus Line.
Good. I want to like sort of imprint sort of like what you're coming into New York with. So you get to New York and you were making a living as a booker, which basically means Fiddler or whatever, they want to do a 2-week run in Chicago.
That's right.
It's your job to sort of arrange that deal with the theater and the marketing.
That's
and
right.
So
when I get to New York in 1986, we're right in the middle of a period in musical theater history in which Cats is now the biggest hit in history. But Chorus Line is on its last leg, still running, because it's 10 years after it opened on Broadway. So it's still running, but we're now definitely in the Cats era. Les Mis is about to open. Phantom will open right after that. So we are clearly in the era of the British invasion or the British rock musicals. But for a lot of reasons, 1, AIDS, 2, cost, 3, perhaps the landscape of New York City, there aren't a lot of new musicals being made.
Yeah, I mean, hearkening back to that conversation, like the whole thing with Sunset Boulevard was the only new musical.
In 1994, when it opened, the only musical with a book and a score was Sunset Boulevard.
Why?
It won Best Book and Best Score by default. The only other musical that season was a jukebox musical called Smokey Joe's Cafe that had no book.
Yes.
It was just a really entertaining review of Lieber and Stoller songs.
Do you know what's funny? I literally blacked that out of my memory until I read your book. And I remembered I went with I was in like 6th grade or something. My best friend's parents took us to see Smokey Joe's Cafe. That is a memory that I've completely lost. That is out of my brain until I read that.
So that's a 10-year period in which musical theater is anemic.
But why?
Like I said, I think a lot of artists were dying of AIDS. This is where you lose Howard Ashman. This is where you lose Michael Bennett. This is where you lose a dozen young men whose names I don't know and you don't know because they died.
Do you know that Fran Lebowitz quote where she's like, the problem with culture today is that all of our great artists died of AIDS and the tastemakers died of AIDS. And she has this joke, if all of those people came back to life and you told them, guess who has a hit on Broadway? Or like, guess who has a hit TV show? They would like drop dead.
Well,
it's one of my favorite Fran Lebowitz quotes.
Well, she certainly is bringing up an important issue, which is in the same way we don't know what society lost from all the Jews that were killed during the Holocaust. We don't know what society lost from all of the young artists and gay men who died of AIDS. So that certainly is one reason, but I can go on and on. When the year I got here, 86, Mystery of Edvin Drood wins for Best Musical. I defy you to tell me another musical nominated that season. Something was nominated, but it was probably Grind, this other show that did not work at all. And then that was the year of Bob Fosse's last show, Big Deal, which was a huge flop. I mean, Broadway was not doing well. And we did not have young talent who were imbuing it with new ideas.
Now, my first introduction to you was actually there's a documentary about Rent that's on the DVD called No Day But Today.
Yes.
It's on the DVD of the Rent movie, and you were interviewed on it. And I remember just loving you. You're sitting in a theater, turned around for the whole interview, and you were so I so connected with with your intensity. You're intense right now, but you were so intense.
Yeah, I'm so intense.
in this doc, and you're so great, and you really bring the whole thing to life. And so I want to lead up to your first connection with Jonathan Larson. Interestingly, the day that you connect with him, or the day that I think you had seen a version of Boho Days, aka Tick Tick Boom, which you're responsible for recommending him that he change the title.
I am.
You're in your office and you are literally getting fired from your job because they see that you're way more passionate about your future than doing this booking job, and they go, Jeffrey, Jonathan Larson's on line 1. So as you're being fired, your future is literally called. I mean, is that not a metaphor?
Yeah, I was sitting in the conference room in the process of getting fired with, receiving that envelope with 2 weeks' salary and then being told I can collect my things and go home now. And while I was being fired, the receptionist came on the full intercom because they couldn't find me in my office because I was sitting in the conference room. So that was when the full office con said, Jeffrey, Jonathan Larson on line 2 or whatever it was. And all I had to say was take a message. And then I called him. When I got home that day, I called him and he said, how are you? And I said, well, I don't know. I've just been fired. He said, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I said, well, if your show means anything, then it must be a good thing. I meant his show, Boho Days, which I just seen. If your show means anything to me, it must be a good thing.
I mean, the path to Rent is so fraught and insane. There were actually the excerpt. I don't remember who ran the excerpt from your book.
New York Magazine.
Yeah, so I read that before I read the book, and I was like, this is fucking crazy. And basically, up until even after he died, there was still this thought of is this a piece of shit? Is this still a mess? And you would continue, his family gave the blessing to continue fixing it with best intentions, even after his passing, until it eventually, I guess, officially opened off Broadway.
Yeah. I mean, he died on the 25th of January, I believe, and we opened off Broadway February 13th. And then we opened on Broadway April 29th of 1996.
And a change that you are extremely passionate about in real time is you really feel that the closing number sung by Roger, the Roger's ode to Mimi when she dies, Your Eyes, you're like, the show cannot end. This song is not good. It is not strong enough to be the closing song, and he can't write another. It's interesting that, I mean, I guess how did you kind of reconcile that of like, oh wow, like we never quite, do you feel that they stuck the landing?
Well, the good news is that we seem to have been okay with it.
Of course.
The truth of it is that the greatest last contribution Jonathan made was writing Take Me or Leave Me for Adina and Freddie. That is the last song he wrote. And when we did the first sing-through of the show in January of 1996 in rehearsal, he did not yet have that song. And I remember everything about the show was starting to work. But that song was not yet in place. So he gave us that before he went. Certainly, had Jonathan survived, I would have been, banging on the cupboard saying, you've got to write a different song for Roger. It was Jim Nicola who famously said to me, or famously only because I thought it was, or I'd say brilliantly said to me, after Jonathan's death, when I complained about the song, he said, well, I guess Roger wasn't a very good songwriter after all, because that was the song he'd been working on for a full year. So I guess Roger wasn't destined to become a great singer, songwriter, rock star. Roger was just a bohemian. And isn't that the story of bohemians? This is not a story about becoming famous. It's a story about living every day as if it might be your last and getting everything out of life that you can on a day-to-day basis, on a week-to-week basis with your friends and your chosen family. So maybe he wasn't a great songwriter, but of course it's the penultimate song and we all get to finish with No Day But Today. So we survived.
Now, the other lasting legacy of Rent was it your idea for the Student Rush tickets?
Well, my business partner, Kevin McCullum, and I were equally passionate that we had to ensure everybody could afford to see Rent. What did that mean? I was 31 years old. I could barely afford a full price ticket to a Broadway musical myself at that moment.
What was the average price at that time?
They were $65.
No. For other shows.
Broadway musicals in 1995-96 were $65. That was the full price. And that was a lot of money.
So today that's triple that, if not higher.
Today it's about $189. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's 30 years later. So, things triple every 10 years. I mean, I'm sorry. Prices tend to double every 10 years on Broadway. So actually, if you think about it, it's not that crazy that we were $65 in 1996 and now we're, $189 or wherever we are.
So the vision was everyone needs to be, especially young people,
have to be able to afford the show. So we thought there had been student discounts back then through TDF and all that, but they were always for students. And they were usually in the nosebleed section in the back of the balcony. And we thought, well, first of all, it has to be for everybody because you get to New York, you've just got your diploma from Oberlin or from, wherever, Wash U, and you have no money. So you still need that ticket. And by the way, maybe you're like a 65-year-old lady and you just retired as a teacher. You need that ticket. Right? So we were like, it has to be number one for everybody. And then number two, I think it might have been Kevin who said, why don't we put them in the first two rows? It'll start a wave and it'll go all the way to the back of the balcony.
Because at that time, the discounted tickets were
in the nosebleed.
Yes.
So we put them in the first two rows. So we said, okay, first two rows, cash only, $20 at the door, 2 hours before the show.
And this became a phenomenon.
And it became such a phenomenon that a year later, on Friday night, there were 3 lines all separately making cues in front of the Nederlander. One was for Friday night, one was for Saturday matinee, and one was for Saturday night. And And of course, like all great things, it started to become cannibalized by kids who were like saving places in line for their friends or kicking other people off, a little bit of a Lord of the Flies. And I thought, more important, I was afraid someone was going to get hurt because this is a whole bunch of kids sleeping over on 41st Street in 1997.
You know what it reminds me of?
What?
The Saturday Night Live standby line.
Yeah, but they're at Rockefeller Center. It's a little safer.
I'm just saying, we're sleeping on the street.
Yeah, but you got a lot of Rockefeller Center police there. We didn't have any Nederlander police. But anyway, it was so a year in, we made the big decision to do it as a 6 p.m. lottery. And that way you don't have to stand in line all day. Anybody can show up at 6 p.m. and enter the lottery. And then eventually when we do Hamilton, Lynn says, well, we got to go do just a Hamilton. It's going to be $10 instead of 20. And we eventually create a digital lottery, which makes it even more accessible, but then therefore less likely to be able to win the lottery.
Yes.
But it's been going all these years, and I'd say it's the single business activity that I'm most proud of.
Really?
Of all the business. Of all the business
because
things.
You made theater accessible.
Because we made theater accessible, and they even used it at the Metropolitan Opera.
I know.
So, so this was our innovation. Kevin and I, this is what we made, and this is what lives on regardless of the show.
Again, present day, George Clooney with Good Night and Good Luck. The headlines are breaking Broadway gross numbers. Yeah, because the tickets are $400+.
Yeah, $450. Or sometimes maybe $800, I don't know.
Is this destroying Broadway? Or is this contributing?
These are very complicated economic questions. I cannot tell you it's destroying Broadway. What I can tell you about those tickets is if they put those tickets on sale for $189, they would still wind up being sold for $800 because they would be resold on the secondary market. So the American system of selling tickets and reselling tickets, of what we called scalping, has been going on since the 19th century. And I don't disrespect the producers of the George Clooney play for taking the ticket to the place where they won't get resold by the scalpers. Because if someone is going to be willing to pay $450 for that ticket, then the author of the play should benefit, the actor in the play should benefit, the producer of the play should benefit, and the investors in the play should benefit. So at least it's all going to the right stakeholders. And for that reason, I have been very active in managing the ticket pricing at Hamilton for these last 10 years.
Yeah.
And I will continue to do so as we bring back Leslie Odom Jr. To the show this fall for, I think he's doing about 10 or 12 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Like people say, like, I mean, I used to ask this, like, what does the producer do? And yes, it is, you are the CEO. You're sort of like the business lead of it. But you strip it even way back to the producer picks the play.
Yeah, something I started doing in 9th grade. When I was in community theater, I, like so many of us theater kids, I was in school plays. I was in the Temple Purim play. I started doing community theater and then youth theater. And I remember being in a play in 8th grade at my youth theater at Stagecrafters in Detroit. And the play was called Popcorn Pete. And I was the Jack in the Box. And it was fun. But I remember two things. One, I thought the title was silly. And two is I didn't think the play was very good. And then there was a number 3, which was I noticed that the audiences were very small. So I was like, why do we do this play? Why? Who would want to come see a stupid show called Popcorn Pete? Maybe it's not good enough. And I said, who gets to pick the play? And they said, oh, well, that's the play reading committee. And I said, well, I want to be on the play reading committee. And I say that when I joined the play reading committee at my youth theater group, that was the first step I took toward becoming a producer. Looking at the forest and not just the trees. Thinking about who's going to direct it, who's going to design it, what is our mission, How are we going to sell it? How are we going to sell it so that a local newspaper wants to write an article about it? How are we going to sell it to the local merchants so that they'll buy ads so we can get some money for the program and the advertising? How are we going to make a poster that's attractive? How are we going to find an audience?
Selling.
Sell it.
I mean, you're a salesman.
My last name is Seller.
Yeah.
Hello.
But not only that, the role, and this, would we consider this the role of the, in other businesses, it would be like executive producer, but would you be considered the lead producer? Because other producers, like A Strange Loop, there are 80 producers. That just means they invested?
Well, we have stretched the definition of producer, and by we, I mean our business over the last 30 years, really 40 years. And that title started to stretch when investors were offered benefits for investing. Sometimes those benefits were better financial terms with the possibility of earning more profit for their dollars. Then most immediately it was billing above the title as a co-producer. So though those investors put money in and maybe a lot of money in, they don't work on the show on a day-to-day basis, but they get this producer billing. If you go back in history, David Merrick presents Bye Bye Birdie and Hello Dolly in 42nd Street. You don't see another producer's name. Hal Prince presents Fiddler on the Roof. You don't see another name. They are the producers doing the work every day. In the same way, I'm now the producer doing the work every day, but you might see other names up there because of the deep need for capital, for money, and because these shows are so expensive.
Your role as producer, and I think that's probably why, like when the New York Times did that feature on you and they call you the CEO of Hamilton, that is the most simplistic way to boil it down.
Yeah, it's a pretty good way, I think, actually, because people tend to know what a CEO does. Yeah. Sometimes I'll even make a comparison, for example, to like a Danny Meyer who owns the Union Square Cafe and all those great restaurants, because he is the owner. And he chooses the chef, but he's not the chef. So maybe the chef is the director or the writer, and the producer is the CEO.
You're also kind of the artistic parent, like what you did for Jonathan Larson and Lin-Manuel Miranda. You are nurturing and critiquing in a gentle way, sometimes not so gentle, but in a necessary way. Oftentimes you're describing meetings with Jonathan where he's like about to cry because of your notes. Yes.
Painful, tough. I think that you have a very apt analogy here, which is producer as parent. And when someone asks me to do their show and I have to turn them down, I usually have to turn them down because I say to myself, I can't spend 5 years or 10 years with this child. I have to love this child so much I can spend 5 years or 10 years, or if I'm lucky enough, 30 years with them. And my job is to nurture, to feed, to teach, sometimes to cheerlead, to criticize.
People who are either exactly my age, so figure like 40, or like 10 years younger, Rent is our North Star. Like,
I love that.
Okay. But even people, I have friends who are in their late 40s and they're like, and above, like it sort of had an inverse age effect where the younger you were, the more you loved it. And the older you were, the more you didn't get it.
That was true in 1996 when it opened. There was a absolute correlation between age and love for the show. And you're right. It was what we call a negative correlation, because the higher your age, the less you liked it, meaning that's a negative correlation. The lower your age, the more you liked it. But yes, Rent was always highly correlated with age.
Why do you think? So, for example, I have a friend who's living in the East Village. She still lives in the East Village. Liz has lived in the East Village for the past 30 years. actually her band had a play. It was Michael Greif's like second production about her band, and they did it off Broadway called Betty Rules. And
Oh yeah. I remember that show.
really,
Yeah.
it played at the Zipper Theater.
Yeah.
And of course, I bang on and on about how I love Rent, and she's always like, I never really got it. She's like, I just didn't understand. Like,
Yeah, but
why-
she's an outlier because the truth is, I'm now.
Well, we're also not the same age. Like she's
Right. But I'm 60 years old and Rent was made for my generation. And I think if you talk to a lot of people who are now in their late 50s, they're going to say, oh, I loved Rent. And I still love Rent. And I still hear from people who are my age all the time who loved Rent. However, when Rent came out, I was 31 years old. And if you talk to people that year who were in their mid 50s or 60. I mean, Manny Eisenberg, the rabbi of Broadway, said to me, he was 62 years old or something when Rent came out. He said, I don't get it, but it's not for me. And in our discussion of whether or not we would be able to sell enough tickets to go to Broadway, he was like, you've got to go to Broadway. This is your shot. I don't get it, but it's not for me. It's for the younger generation. But he was 62.
In a stroke of genius. So there is going to be an audiobook released, and the people who read the audiobook are all these Broadway stars. Like, tell me the people who.
Well, I just thought it would be so fun to get all these amazing actors to read all of the characters because the characters are kind of fun and vivid. So Lindsay Mendez is playing my mother, and Danny Burstein's playing my father, and Conrad Ricamora from Oh Mary is playing my business partner, Kevin McCullum. And Jesse Tyler Ferguson is playing Paul Blake, who was one of my earlier employers. And in their own virtual electronic reunion, Renee Goldsberry and Lin-Manuel are playing Barry and Fran and Barry Weissler. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun for people to listen to that.
Who played? Two questions. And you play yourself.
And I play myself.
Of course.
And I read all the prose.
Of course.
And I just did not want the audience to have to hear my voice for 8 hours.
Who plays Jonathan Larson?
Darren Criss.
Nice. And this is a bit of a deep cut in the book. Who plays the two guys who you fucked in the steam room at the New York Sports Club on your 30th birthday?
I don't believe you're going to go there. Well, here's the truth. There was no was no dialogue, so no one plays them.
Do you now believe I read the book?
Oh, I believed you read the book, but now I really believe you read the book. Now, if I'm turning red, excuse me. But since you brought it up.
Oh, yeah.
I want to say it was important to me. Obviously, yes. So I write about two guys I had sex with in a steam room.
Well, it's significant because it's your 30th.
Why did I write about it? I was writing about what it meant to be 30, what it meant to be lonely, and what I would do to try to assuage my loneliness. And it had a dramatic purpose, which was, what do we young gay men do when we feel lonely? And we often seek sex. And that's why it's there.
Yes. And I think a lot of, when you think of quote unquote theater kids, it's funny because I also talked to Jeff Hiller about this. In his book, he describes himself as like a theater queen. And in his characterization, like his definition of a theater queen is that they've been made fun of since the dawn of time, and they are universally perceived to be unfuckable. And what I loved is that it sexualizes the sort of theater queen.
Yeah. Well, everybody wants to be fucked. I don't know how else. I just don't know how else to answer that question.
Yeah, like I liked how it sort of like it humanized you in this whole other spectrum out of like everything else that every other page on this book is talking.
How did we get there from you were talking about illustrations?
No, because then we were talking about how you turn this into a play.
Oh, right. Oh, right. Yeah,
and that was such a vivid scene.
Yeah.
I want to know about the scene work in that one. So you narrate that?
Yeah.
Very good. All right. I want to talk. So Hamilton, in the Heights, Hamilton, a friend of yours invited you to a reading of In the Heights?
Yeah, our friend and sound designer Nevin Steinberg had told Kevin McCullum about it, and then Kevin called me as it was about to start to say, "Hey, can you get over here? There's a vibe. There's something going on in this room. You got to get over here." And I was going to see another show, so I was like, "I can't come," but he went, and Kevin fell in love. And Kevin said to me the next day, "I found our next show," and I said, "Well, we'll see." And then he brought in Lin-Manuel and Tommy Kail, his director, and the band of young men who had been working on In the Heights. They'd been developing it in the basement of the Drama Bookshop, where Tommy Kail had a theater company. And then we started on that road. And then Kiara Hudes joined us, who's a terrific young Latina playwright. She had written a off-Broadway show called Barrio Girl. And we went on that road, and we developed that with them for about 4 years before we did the show. We started in 2003, and then, of course, we opened it off-Broadway at 37 Arts in 2007.
Here's what's interesting. And In the Heights has this in common with Fun Home. They both won the Tony Award.
Yes.
Fun Home won Best Play. In the Heights won...
No. Fun Home and In the Heights both won Best Musical.
Oh, they did. Okay, they both won Best Musical. And yet, they both closed in like 3 years. It's so interesting how like a Tony win, it's like, why do some shows run forever? Like Wicked runs forever.
Well, 20 years.
And Cats, Phantom, these run forever. And why, like the Tony winners, Wicked is still modern, but why In the Heights, like why does that close? Like why does Hamilton run for a decade plus? Why do Fun Home and In the Heights close?
I can be very reductive, and I'm not being facetious when I say because less people went to see them. But then you have to say, why are less people interested in seeing Fun Home or seeing In the Heights? I believe that what held In the Heights back was a certain amount of latent fear having to do with rap music. People still thought, oh, it's a rap musical. That's not for me. And I think that there may have been some latent racism, that they knew that In the Heights was about Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and Cubanos. And I think there may have been some racism at work with that because it was such a joyous show. I thought it should run for 5 or 6 or 7 years. But who is to say what makes a show's audience both expand and grow depth? In the Heights ran 3 years on Broadway. It made a nice profit. It recouped its investment. It was a hit. Back in the 70s or the 80s, if you ran 3 years, you're a hit. It's fine. Believe it or not, Annie ran from 77 to about 81. It ran for like 5 years. It didn't run for 10 years. And it was one of the biggest hits of its time. Evita ran from 79 to about 84. It ran about 5 years.
I mean, word of mouth is responsible.
It's all word of mouth. I mean,
Yeah.
the marketing, which, I think I do a pretty good job with marketing. We've had some great marketing campaigns over the years that I'm very proud of. But at the end of the day, it's word of mouth. The audience keeps it going.
Yeah, you say Hamilton, the people who went to see it at the public theater, all 800 of those people told their friends, and that's why.
Yes.
What shows have you lost money on?
But yes, I lost money doing a musical I loved very much called The Last Ship by Sting, a wonderful creative process that resulted in a show that did not connect with an audience and that did not have good word of mouth and that sadly closed in less than 6 months. And it was deeply painful. And when we were developing The Last Ship, I thought that show would be a big hit. And part of my job as a producer is to ask myself, what did we do wrong? What could we have done better? And am I willing to accept that the audience doesn't like my show? And I have to, because I have to look at the box office every morning and ask how many tickets did I sell yesterday? And when producers talk about word of mouth, it's not a feeling. It's not a spirit. It is an actuality. Word of mouth means that after the performance on Tuesday, on Wednesday, more people buy tickets than purchase tickets on Tuesday. Word of mouth means that after Wednesday's 2 shows on Thursday, more people buy tickets than bought tickets on Wednesday or Tuesday. It means the box office rises. There is no such thing as good word of mouth and poor sales. There is only great, what we call good, great. Word of mouth means more sales. And if you're not getting more sales, you don't have good word of mouth. And it's up to you to face it. And by you, I just mean you, the producer. Me. I have to face it.
Opening night reviews are actually quite critical to a show's success. Take me into, now you've been through countless opening nights where, at 10:30 or 10:05, those reviews, because like the critics see the show in previews and their press performances, but that is when the embargo lifts and reviews are published. Describe your opening night experiences regarding reviews, because you got to have the stomach for it.
Oh, it's the single most agonizing moment in the life of a producer and in the life of making a show, having to wait for that New York Times review that will come out, as you say, approximately 10:02, 10:03 p.m. Folks are doing different things now. Some are actually now having a party a couple nights before so they don't have to deal with the review at the party. And everyone seems to be doing a party again. But when we opened Sweeney Todd, which was not long after COVID, we decided not even to have a party on opening night because we were like, a party's just going to spread COVID if anybody has it. And we all just have to deal with the review. So we just said to the cast, you guys go out for drinks. And we didn't even have that. And of course, we got lucky that night. We had a terrific review. But there is still a magic to getting a great review in the New York Times. And it's also true that sometimes the New York Times writes great reviews for shows that still die. And sometimes shows get crimey reviews from the New York Times that live. Why? Audience. The audience ultimately will decide. And that's a good thing.
Why do you think you have the stomach for it? I mean, obviously it doesn't get easier. Has it gotten easier?
No, I don't know that. It's not that I have the stomach for it. It's that I like to make new things.
It's part of the job.
I love musicals. I like to make new musicals. I'm not going to stop making new musicals. And I know that my job is to try to make a great musical that pleases me and therefore pleases the audience. And that's all I'm going to try to do.
What are you working on next?
I am
working now.
Yes. You're going to hate my answer. I am working. I'm having some fun, and I don't talk about what I'm working on until I'm ready.
Well, I mean, I guess you wrote this. How long did it take to write when did you get the book deal? And like, how long was the writing process?
Well, first of all, the book deal came after I wrote a book. I did not seek a book deal and then wrote a book. I actually wrote a book just for me. I needed to write this book. And this book took me somewhere between 5 years and 30 years to write.
How do you remember because you're like I'm excited to listen to the audiobook because it's literally going to be like an audio play. How are you remembering these conversations in such vivid detail?
So there's a couple stories in this book, chapters, that actually I wrote about 30 years ago. So I was writing them a lot closer to when they happened.
Like you kept a journal?
Well, I took some writing classes when I was in my 20s.
Oh.
So I was writing in my 20s. And I did keep a journal. I both kept a lot of letters that I'd written. For some reason, I started writing letters to people in high school, and I somehow already knew I should copy them before I sent them. So I had copies of all these letters I'd written.
The letters between you and Jonathan Larson, like they're all in there.
Yeah.
They're printed.
Yeah, those are all, obviously we saved all those. But I kept journals through all of college. So I was able, in some instances in this book, to bring back moments and remind myself of things that I didn't remember, but they were in my journal, so I had them.
Yeah.
Like names of campers.
Oh my God. Oh, the final thing with Hamilton, the name change. So originally he envisioned, he's like, yeah, I'm just going to do a rap album. And then you were like, no, I think this is actually a musical.
Well, Lynn wanted to make a concept album first of all rap. And my job was to say, what? I'll do whatever you want. I'm going to nurture. So if you want help making an album, I'll help you make an album. Ultimately, he decided to make the musical first, and his collaborator, Thomas Cale, had a lot to do with that in persuading him, let's make a musical. And when Lynn was developing it, he was calling it the Hamilton mixtape. And there was a moment where, I don't know that I'm the only one who said it, but certainly there was a moment where I said, and can I just recommend, please cut the mixtape and just call it Hamilton.
You know what that reminds me of? You've seen the movie The Social Network about the making of Facebook.
I loved The Social Network.
So, Sean Parker, played by Justin Timberlake, his famous line, by the way, because it was called The Facebook for many years. And he goes,
that's right.
By the way, lose the, it's cleaner. Hamilton is a lot cleaner than the Hamilton mixtape.
Yeah, it's like Rent.
Yes.
Nice. One word.
Clean.
So
obviously Boho Days turned into Tick Tick Boom title-wise. Were there any other potential titles for Rent?
No.
It was always
Jonathan
Rent.
always knew that his contemporary version of La Boheme would be Rent.
I thought it was so funny how you take during like the torturous part of crafting and so many different versions, how you at one point you take him to see La Boheme, the opera, and you're like, bitch, Mimi doesn't enter Rent until 30 minutes in. You're like, she's in 15 minutes in. And also, this is twice as long and more complicated than
It's true.
La Boheme.
It
made me
is
laugh.
4 acts, and every act is 30 minutes. It's only a 2-hour opera. The only reason it takes 3 hours when you go to the Met is because their set changes take so long at intermission. They add a whole hour of intermission.
They have 4 intermissions, many.
No, for La Boheme, they have one between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and 3 and they have between Act 1 and Act 2, they have an intermission. Between Act 2 and Act 3, they have a mission. In Act 3 and Act 4, they have 3 intermissions. Yeah, that's why it takes over 3 hours. But La Boheme is a 2-hour opera, and Mimi comes in within 15 minutes, and that was part of our education process with Jonathan Larson.
And I love how you say Light My Candle is one of the single greatest
musical theater storytelling.
Yeah,
Kevin said that.
Because it actually moves the plot forward.
And it's a remarkable rock duet.
Here, this is the little button on that story about Betty Rules.
Yeah.
So that friend, the one who was like, banging on about it. So she loves the opera, and I've actually never been to the opera. And she's like, I'm going to take you. She's like, decide when you want to say. I'm like, well, I think maybe let's like dip my toe in with like, I think it's got to be La Boheme. At least I'll know what the fuck is going on. So I saw that in December.
Oh, that's great. And did you have a good time?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I would totally go to the opera again.
Beautiful.
I mean, I think we did it. Is there anything else? I feel like we did it.
No, it was a great conversation. Yeah.
This has been so fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love how you opened and dug out that scene at my 30th birthday, because that was a scene about how much we all cared, even though we were being bitingly critical. And that's your job when you're 29 years old.
What are you looking forward to? Like, you're going on like a speaking tour. You're going to be doing a thing at the Public Theater with Lin-Manuel Miranda.
I'm doing, I don't know when your thing is. I'm doing one with Lynn and Tommy and at the Public. That's sold out. I'm also doing one with the great Alex Edelman at my temple at Congregation Beth Simchat Torah on Wednesday the 7th.
Amazing.
So if this comes out before then, listeners should know it's going to be a great night. So that'll be Alex Edelman and I on the 7th. Yeah.
And anybody who's interested, like I think my listeners knows, I'm very obsessed with real. This has nothing to do with anything. I mean, it has to do with you. When I was, preparing for this, I did come across your architectural digest. Like they chronicled the renovation of your townhouse.
Yes.
On Riverside Drive, and that's a whole. I could do an hour on that.
Well, the only thing I'll say about that is that, being able to live on Riverside Drive was its own dream come true. And that comes out of the book, too, because it was inspired by a movie that I saw when I was only 20, when I just moved to New York and I was 22 years old. It was called Parting Glances. And it was a beautiful movie about AIDS, community, gay relationships in the 1980s. And the whole movie opens with this beautiful scene of a young guy reading a book in Riverside Park, and then this hunky guy who kind of looks like Superman is jogging through the park, and he grabs the book from the other guy, and they start chasing each other, and then they chase each other through the cobblestone paths of Riverside, and then they go up into their apartment, which is like on Riverside in the 80s or the 90s, and then they throw their clothes off, and then they're like kissing in the shower. And I thought it was the sexiest, most beautiful romantic scene I'd ever seen. I was like, I want to live on Riverside Drive.
And you did this gorgeous renovation.
Well, thank you.
Jeffrey Seller, theater kid, listen to the audiobook, buy the physical book because the illustrations are beautiful. I mean, we did it.
What a pleasure. It's really great to spend time with you today, Jess.
Loved you since I saw you in No Day But Today.
And thank you.
What
That's
a
really
dream come
sweet.
true that you're sitting in for the guy that I was obsessed with in this documentary.
I love that. I love that.
Thank you so much.
With pleasure.